Uday and Tony will be doing a few words on why we are here and how startups are important for Microsoft. And I will pass it on to Uday again.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us for another fantastic masterclass. We're so lucky to have Chris joining us now for his fourth masterclass for the Oxbridge-AIx community. Chris is going to share what was one of the most popular masterclasses last year about AI in tech, especially showcasing how we can get started with Microsoft for Startups in Azure. Really, really robust system with the best support you can find. Yeah, that's me, and a big shout out to all of our heroes and others who are joining us, and looking forward to getting started. Tony, would you like to share a few words?
Sure. Hi everyone. My name is Tony Hassan. I'm actually coming out for the Oxbridge-AIx challenge on the 6th, so I'm excited to actually meet you all in person. And that is actually what I wanted to come and say is this is our second year partnering with Oxbridge-AIx, and we are in the business of essentially supporting early stage founders who are building AI solutions, but SaaS solutions in general. Oxbridge is one of 15 partnerships that we've curated for this academic year. Among them are partnerships with Stanford, Carnegie Mellon University, Georgia Tech, really the best programs out there that are building the next generation of founders and startups. And Oxbridge is one of those programs. So we're very excited to be supporting all of you. We're very excited to be working with this community, both from Oxford and from Cambridge, whether you're a current student, a PhD student, an alumni, a faculty. I think what Uday and Francisco have been doing is building an incredible community of innovation and formidable founders. So wanted to let you know in our program, which you will have an ability to hear more about. You have a preferred offer, so use it. Please, test your things out on Azure, tinker around, use our technology. We're here to support you. Through our program, you also have the ability to access experts at Microsoft across a ton of expertise, and also set up Azure engineering hours with one-on-one with engineers that can help you with all the potential hurdles that you might have or getting started with a platform if you haven't worked on Azure before. So really just to say lots of luck. Thank you, Uday, for the wonderful partnership. And we're very excited to be supporting you. And of course, thank you to Anne Claire, who spearheads this partnership with us in the UK. And I will pass it back to you, Uday.
Cool. Well, I really appreciate that. I mean, it's been a really magical relationship. The amount of support we get, really, really grateful for it, learning so much constantly, and also the amount of faith and confidence you have for us. We live on it. So appreciate that. And without any more delay, I'd love to give Chris the mic, as you may, because he's the man of the hour. And everyone, if you haven't already read it or seen it, Chris recently published a book and was recently nominated one of JavaScript's community's People of the Year. So we're very lucky to have him.
Kind words, Uday, and yes, we definitely appreciate all the partnerships around this. So hopefully I'll get you folks inspired. I should mention this though, I have a separate deck on retrieval augmented generation alone. So if you feel like, hey, can we deep dive a little bit? I am prepared, don't worry. But I wanted to take you from absolute zero so you understand the different use cases that's actually in front of you. Because sometimes it's very, very easy to be a tech person like myself and just say, I want all the bells and whistles, but question is, does this actually benefit your client and your customer? So that's why I just want to take baby steps to understand at which moment do you need to pivot, at which moment do you need to add more technology. Because you might actually be at the point where an Excel sheet is perfectly fine and you can run your business on that. I believe many of you have done so as well. So AI workshop, right? AI is the word of the hour. It's almost impossible to present anything these days without mentioning the word AI. You mean AI first, right, Chris? AI plus bills, AI plus technology, what have you. So with that said, this is roughly the table of content, but as I said, I can deep dive if you want to. So I definitely got the slides for that as well. So first off, why AI is important for your startup. I think every single startup and CEO out there should at least have an opinion on AI. That doesn't mean that you kick off an AI project, but it should already be benefiting your individual work streams. And as a startup, you should feel that you've hired instantly 4 new people. So if you don't feel like that, please have a look at ChatGPT and understand how you can leverage that. The other bit here is, of course, to introduce cloud and Azure because, we come from Microsoft. But with that said, there's definitely a lot of services that are very similar across the cloud. So hopefully you can adopt should you go with AWS or GCP or what have you. Then I'll walk you through a bunch of scenarios. So you got the LLM itself, you got something called assistants, and something called agents. So it might be a bit confusing to navigate that space. So I'll do my best to kind of lead you towards that. And then, of course, we'll get a chance, I believe, at the end of this deck to talk more about how Founders Hub should support you, the platform, all the perks, the expert network that we've already mentioned, so you feel like we're here for you. Right. So why is AI important for your startup? I always start all my lectures with a big why, right? If you don't understand why, the rest is just a waste. So competitive edge. That is the first thing, right? So if you, as a startup, whatever kind of startup you have, don't use AI either for your own work streams or as part of your product, I guarantee you your competitor will. And that means to automate repetitive tasks to free up your cycles. That is the most valuable currency you have. That is your own time. So it should enable you to create new products, have that extra customer meeting or whatever you want to use those cycles on. Data-driven decision-making. Now, of course, you can do a lot of data without AI, but it definitely helps. Did you know, for example, if you use something called Azure Fabric, you can literally create a dashboard from a prompt? Just imagine that. Like it used to take at least 2 weeks to create that Power BI dashboard to get all those insights. And then you got someone saying, well, can you change it? Yeah, that'll be another 2 weeks. In reality, everything is prompt-based, right? NLP, natural language programming, that is the new user interface. So if your product can benefit from that, definitely consider adding it. It doesn't mean that you sprinkle AI on everything. I don't believe in that. But definitely study the use case and at least rule it out. Do your homework, do your due diligence. Now, as part of data-driven decision-making, actionable insight is probably the most important thing that you can get. If you understand what your customer is doing, are they buying your products? Are they leaving your company? Or are you actually in a phase where a lot of people want to sign on or even sign on for a more valuable package as part of what you offer as a startup? You want to know and you want to capitalize on that. Anticipating market trends, that's another thing, right? Predictive analysis. Do you understand what goes on in your problem domain? Are you picking up on the latest trends? How are you interpreting the latest trends to act, to pivot as a startup? And then, of course, as I said, understanding customer behavior is key. Now, this is a piece of advice I'm going to give you all, AI or no AI. Put some kind of tracker on every single page, providing that your product is a web page. Every single page, every single interaction, log that as much as humanly possible. If you understand the journey that a customer takes through your system, you are already ahead of the game. And if you don't know what's going on. You are flying blind. Now, personalization, of course, is another aspect of this. You can create that personalized experience that you know that all customers want. Customers want to be able to feel special, right? They don't want to be one generic out of 100K customers or 10 customers or whatever. They want to be able to customize, give them that opportunity. And one thing that I'm about to mention later in the deck is just take a normal search and an e-commerce, right? You go shopping for whatever, and you type some keywords, hoping for the best, and you're praying, and you're getting something, right? You want to be able to ask questions in the way that you want to ask questions. If I want shoes, I want a hat or whatever I want to be able to describe, well, it needs to look really like the latest fashion, and you want to be kind of vague, right? That's how we speak as human, right? And then, of course, the strategic imperative. Startups that leverage AI are twice as likely to succeed as those that don't. That is a huge, crushing number, right? So have a think about that. If you don't leverage AI, that's what you're missing out on. Now, with that kind of pep talk, I think a lot of you are probably already thinking, yeah, Chris, we're always thinking AI. We're not just sure where to put it. So this is how Azure can help you. Seamlessly, of course. AI is integrated into many of our services. You have low-code platforms where you can use prompts already to create big flows, integration flows. Anything is prompt-based today. So I hope you're using ChatGPT or Bing Search or what have you, or Azure Fabric, as I mentioned. But then you also have the fact that you can train your machine learning or AI workloads on something like Azure ML. That is maybe your classic take, but there are many ways of doing this on Azure. Many of them have a prompt interface, and you want to be able to leverage that. And of course, this offers you a new way to interact. Generative AI, an NLP interface. You use prompts to build apps, to manage your security, and much more. But of course, many of you are maybe coming into this call today and thinking, I'm a builder. I want to integrate AI as part of the experience of the customers using my app. So what does that look like? Well, I don't think there's a soul out there who hasn't heard about ChatGPT. I'm not even going to ask you to pull your hands up and tell me. I just assume you know what it is. But of course, we throw around these acronyms, LLMs, SLMs. What does it mean? Large language model, that's what that means. It's a general purpose model who's pretty good at a lot of things. It produces multimodal output, and it also takes multimodal input. Examples of that are ChatGPT, GitHub Copilot, and a lot of other copilots. I lost count actually how many copilots we have on Microsoft, but I think it's 16 plus. Just to give you a sense that copilots are literally everywhere. And it's coming to all your programs out there, not just things Microsoft. So again, why LLM in your app, right? Very, very easy to start talking about AI and say, of course we need AI. And then just like the ball drops and you're like, okay, what does that actually mean for the customer experience? Because that's your only truth. Improved user experience, yeah, right? Users can type what they want. That's a better search. Just having an NLP interface everywhere is a huge deal on a lot of applications. Better FAQ experience. I don't know how many went into an e-commerce website thinking, oh, I got a question. And then you start reading through the FAQ and it's like, nope, that's not the question I want. That's the wrong angle. And you just want to phrase things in your way. Offering that experience to customers, I promise you, you have everything to gain. And of course, more and better responses via RAG type solutions, which I'm going to talk about also. And the gist of that is that you get answers based on your data. Okay, so now we're in agreement that there is a good reason why we should be adding LLMs in our app to customize that experience to make your customers like you and hopefully come back and buy more things. Right, so moving things forward, let's talk about one use case that I find is interesting because, well, this has been around for a while and it hasn't been great. Let's be honest. You integrate the bot. For a while there, everyone integrated the bot in Facebook or whatever platform, and you're like, I'm not sure about this, right? It had keywords, you got responses, and then they asked something that you didn't know anything about, and it's like, nope. That was fun for like 2 minutes flat, I think. I mean, and the win here now we're using LLMs, you can actually use natural language. So even if your bot doesn't know everything, at least it feels more like you're talking to a person, right? It's not very constrained in the way that you can converse with it. So just having that, make it feel like natural language is a huge win in itself. But of course, let's look at the user case for this. Before the use case, let's talk about the effort, because we want some kind of sense of how hard is this to do. Well, connecting to an LLM isn't that difficult. Of course, you need to create or provision a cloud resource in the cloud. You need to decide on a deployment model. Once you have that in place, the actual number of lines of code isn't that big. What you need to know is that you need to create a client based on some type of credential. We do recommend managed identity in the cloud, meaning that there's an identity that the cloud keeps track of, and less on API keys. But we don't want to hold you back, even though please move away from API keys, but we get it. For the MVP, do whatever, right? Just make sure to keep your customer safe. But you see here, there's not a lot of lines of code. Create a client, prepare a set of chat messages, provide those to the client, and you get some kind of response. Short comment though, because I'm mentioning a few things of interest here. Chat messages, Chris, what are those? Well, normally that's your history. And it also usually contains something called a system message. This is the personality of the chat bot that you're talking to. If you want to make that into a tourist guide or history professor, that's the system message, and it should be included as part of this initial load. Now, as you keep having this conversation, it is stateless, right? So you need to keep providing that set of messages as they grow. But fair word of warning to all you developers out there, you don't want to provide it with 100 messages. That's probably way more context than it's ever going to need. So probably 4 or 5, or maybe the last hour, whatever makes sense, right? So you don't want what's known now as the context window to grow too much. But again, there are a few other concepts here that's good to know about. How many tokens, max tokens, and the temperature. Now, the temperature is a value between 0 and 1, and this is about creativeness. Should it be very creative in its response or not at all? So knowing that there's a temperature lever that you can, configure to your liking between 0 and 1, experiment. See what fits you. Maybe your customers actually want to have a more randomized experience. And also consider, do you want this public facing or internal facing? That's another thing. And of course, as part of all this, consider costs, right? Because if you just put an LLM out there and your customers start loving it and using it, and you're like, oh, my cloud bills, ouch. So also consider if you can cache responses, for example, for very similar prompts. We do have services out there that lets you do all of that through policies, by the way. Let's get back to our use case, right? Because I want you to understand at which point you technically pivot to do something more advanced. So please be conservative with all this as long as you physically can. So we start here. Tell me about your camping products. Okay, that sounds good. There's a prompt, it's a natural language, and the LLM says, well, there are many things classified as camping products, like tents and boots and blah, 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 right? Okay, fair enough response. The user might be like, okay, it seems to know something. I could type in my own way. Great, I like the better experience than the keyword, and then the user does this. Now the user says, tell me about your camping products at your company. At which point it says, sorry, I can only give you generic answers. There you have it, right? That's not a great experience for the user. They kind of lose confidence in you as a company because, hey, you put up a chatbot, it wasn't that interesting. Like, sure, it impressed them for a full minute. So you need to pivot from there. So what do? Well, you need to, of course, to integrate your data, right? So if you feel like the customer can benefit from seeing stuff on their own data or your specific data, now's a chance to do it. But of course, the devil here is in the details. So you need to provide your data at the moment of prompting. The naive approach is to just copy paste a bunch of stuff into the prompt. And another approach is to use what's called tool calling. And the third approach is to use RAG. So let's go through all of these scenarios and the different pros and cons. Right. So now you're saying what? Here's everything you know of Contoso. We sell tents and shoes and whatnot. So at this point, you have just said, always provide this bolded text as part of every user prompt. These are all my products. This should offer a better user experience. So now it's kind of pairing your company knowledge with your user knowledge, but there is a problem with this. So even if this works for, maybe 2 minutes, you're going to encounter a problem. So it kind of works, but it's not efficient. And why is it not efficient? Because you are a big company, most likely, right? You have pages and pages of products described in PDF files, Word files. Maybe you got video content, and you have content in different formats, and it simply doesn't fit in the context window. Now, I should say, though, that context windows are becoming less and less of a problem. In the beginning of LLMs, it was a huge problem because context window was this big. Now we're talking about it allowing millions of tokens. So we are I wouldn't say we're moving away from RAG for a while, but we are starting to see solutions in which this becomes less of a pain. But as I said, what if the content lives in different formats? And of course it does, because most companies out there, they have unstructured content. 80% of all content out there is unstructured, and the definition of unstructured is that it doesn't live in a table format. So that's JSON, that's audio, that's video. All of your content as a company matters. And guess what? You are producing a lot of it, and you probably want to take that content and make that either internally searchable or externally. So, function calling. This is my one of my earliest go-tos before I start to talk RAG solution. And this is the ability of the LLM to actually take your user-defined functions as inputs and generate structured outputs. This is a big deal, right? You can actually teach the LLM to sit and do neat little circus tricks, right? Playing with balls and whistle and what have you. And this will take you far, I promise you. So imagine now that you are creating a better search. So for example, now that in the past, in your e-commerce, what was I going to say? In your e-commerce that sold trips to the sun, we have seen a lot of those. You had this search text bar and users were searching, I want to go to the Canary Islands or the Maldives or what have you. And maybe I want to search for hotels. And you can only give them a very canned response. But now you're telling them, hey, you can actually use NLP. You can use your own user language to search for this. And we need to figure out how to do this. The answer here is tool calling. So what you do is that you define a function. You can do this in any language, Python, Java, JavaScript, C#, what have you. So you create this function. The function takes parameter, and the parameters are where, the location, and the max price. So these are two parameters that you need to match to whatever the user ends up typing. Okay, great. So we have some kind of function that does something that probably calls an API that fetches all this data and it filters the response based on location and max price. Okay, so let's take function calling and actually explain what's going on. So you take that function that I showed you, but this time around you describe it as a JSON schema that we see here at the bottom left. In this JSON schema, we are essentially saying the exact same thing, but in JSON. So we're saying you have a function called search hotels. You have a description, a semantic description of when this tool should be called. And this is very important information because you can actually attach a bunch of tools to your LLM and say, hey, you know how to search hotels, you know how to book hotels, you know how to book a car, and so on and so forth. So you need to keep these tools separate. You need to make sure that the correct tool is called at the correct moment. So here you give it a description that says, retrieves hotels from search. Fantastic description, right? That should definitely differentiate it from another tool that says books cars. So if the user types something semantically different, it should be able to say, well, for this time, I'll do search hotel, and for your next search, I'm going to do book cars. And you can also see that there's a properties thing here that contains location and max price. So we are describing what our variables are and also what the type is. And this is very important, right? Because we are teeing the LLM up in such a way that it's able to parse this information from a user prompt. So what happens then if we put all of these parts in action is that the user now can type their user prompt their way, where they say hotel with a private beach cost max 300 euros in Delmaris. That sounds like a pretty good vacation, and it's kind of constrained on budget. So what happens here is the assistant, the LLM, is actually going to say, well, I see what you did there. So it sounds like you're saying location is Delmaris and max price is 300, and that I should be calling the tool that's about search hotels. So parsing happens for you, and the LLM will actually tell you, I recommend this tool. So what happens now when we put everything into action is that the user is now typing, show me hotels in Greece for max 500 euros. In which case now the LLM, because it is aware of this search hotel tool, is now able to see, here, Chris, here's a list of hotels matching your requirement. Just pausing here for a second, because if you haven't heard of this before, this is huge. The LLM can actually be told about tools. The LLM can be extended to know about this. And at this point, I haven't mentioned that much RAG. And if all you want to do is create a better search in which it can be an NLP type of search, so the user can type the search in their language, You just need to hook it up with a bunch of tools, building out a bunch of capabilities. Now, of course, what's happening now behind the scenes, just to repeat, the LLM figures out the tool you should run based on information you provided to it in JSON format. The LLM parses out parameter values, and the LLM then tells you what you should do. But it's still up to you as a developer to ultimately make the function call to the correct function. But you are being led by the fact that the LLM says, Chris, I think you should call search hotel. So you either at this point say, okay, fair enough, I'll call whatever function you have. So you as a developer, you're the one that ends up calling the tool, but you have some really good recommendations coming through from the LLM. So this is roughly what it looks like. We have a client now that connects to the LLM. We are asking it to do chat completions. So what's happening here is that we are saying, what's the weather like in somewhere and in some unit like Celsius and Fahrenheit? And what happens now is that we provide it with a get current weather function. This is a JSON version of a function that we defined, if you remember the function calling, where we just say, this is the function, this is description, these are the parameters. And what happens then in the for loop below is that it now traverses the answer. And the function call here tells us, this is the function I want to call, Chris, if you're in agreement. These are the parameters that I found for you in the user prompt. And then you end up actually calling find weather. Now, of course, if the function call parameter was not find weather, but maybe buy me a drink, you would have called that tool instead. So hopefully that makes a lot of sense for you. And this is a lot of empowerment already for the LLM. So I'm going to let that sink in for a second before I move on. As I said, this is the use case, right? An e-commerce with a better search. So imagine now that you have your own web page for your business and you can thereby create a better search. This should be a huge value add to your business already. And you haven't even involved LLMs or PDFs. But if you have that type of content, what do you do? Well, let's first take tool calling here for a little spin so you see how that works for us. So now I actually have a little video here, so let's play it. So in this video, I have a notebook. For those of you who are not Python developers, this is a combination of text and code. So what we can do with this notebook then is to define our functions, define our JSON version of the same functions, and then kick off our LLM that are now being instructed that it actually has access to a number of tools. And with tools, I mean functions. So we're going to set it up and say we're going to run a specific Python core. But I don't know if you see the video here, but we are definitely defining several tools. Two of them are doing different SQL calls towards a database. And now we're creating the client that we need, and we are also providing the JSON version of these tools so the LLM knows how to reason. And then we end up doing the actual call to the LLM, and we are trying to figure out what happened. So now that we send in our messages, we construct our assistant, and we have a prompt here. We send in a prompt that says we want to know stuff about Africa, and it ends up selecting a tool, calling that tool, and get us a response back from a database. But what happened was that it parsed out parameters from the user's prompt. Same thing here, but because the prompt was constructed differently, you get a different response. So that's tool calling in action. Not that many moving parts to keep track of at this point. So I want you to feel this, that you have a win already. This is great. We can have the LLM call tools. It can talk to our APIs. Is this not enough? In many cases, I argue that it is enough, but you will reach a state where it isn't. So it depends on the use case and it depends on the data type. What if you want to search through your PDFs or other PowerPoint or other type of data that you also have as a company? You need a better approach, and we call that approach RAG, or Retrieval Augmented Generation. So before moving on to RAG, let's learn a bit more about prompting, because prompting actually matters. We can be better at prompting if we just learn some basic rules. Let's humor me a little bit and let's go through some prompting types. So here is some common prompts that we can have. For example, we can say stuff like generate 10 questions and answers on geography. Now, of course, if you're a startup and you got a customer saying these things, like, are they in the right place? We want them to buy something, right? Or build me an app and so on. So these are very simple prompts. But the fact is, we are talking about something called prompt engineering. This is not an engineering degree. This is not a master's or a bachelor's, but it is more like emergent properties, things that we have discovered that the LLM is capable of. So we can actually write better prompts, just like we can learn to communicate better with people. So I would argue and say it's similar rules that applies, because with people, the more context you provide, the more they understand where you are coming from. It is the same thing with LLMs. So what you can do then with LLMs is you can lead it in its reasoning. So here you have a sentence where you say that Adam has 14 apples. He gives 3 apples away to Eve and discards 2 apples and tosses 1. How many apples does Adam have? And the LLM gets it wrong. The LLM is not very good at this, right? It's not good at math. Stop using it as a calculator if you are. Just stop, step away. But what you can do then is something called chain of thought. What chain of thought means is that you tells it how to reason. So you say, you know what, LLM? Here you have a similar example. Take the similar example, then take the user prompt, and then try to answer that very same question again, and rightly so, it's able to calculate this correctly. This is just like a teacher talking to a student, right? This, Chris, is how you break down this math problem. This is how you define this equation. And I get it. I'm like, yay, I'm super smart till I'm not. So yes, chain of thought is a very good principle to know about. But of course, there are tons of different principles here when it comes to how to prompt better, like least to most. So for example, if you want to break down bigger problems into smaller problems, or if you want to self-refine to critique the solution, this is also things that I think that you should have on your backend. So why am I mentioning this in the context of integrating AI? These are patterns that you can implement on the backend to ensure that the end user, your customer, gets a better response back. So if you, for example, you get that first response from the LLM, you're not sure about it, use a prompt pattern and actually say, critique this response. Are you sure you're correct? Can you break down whatever response you have into smaller bits? So this is for you on the back end. Before you serve that answer back to the client, make sure it goes through these kind of patterns, because then you can make sure that if you need to take it for another spin towards the LLM for a better response, please do so. So these are improvement techniques for a better outcome. Right. So back to doing more with LLMs, right? That's the theme of this talk today. So we are talking about large language models. We have an improved input with natural language prompts. We already have this. It speaks many languages. This is fantastic, right? You can just ship that e-commerce store of yours globally from day one. You can have a globally recognizable search in French, in Swedish, whatever language you want, Arabic, and it just understands your end user. And the user can ask the question any way they want, right? So if you don't have this, I guarantee you your competitor will. And of course, the benefit is that you can have a lot of back office improvements of this. So even if you implement it as a back office solution, you can use it as a tutor to enhance your existing workflows. And as I showed you today, you can have tools. And of course, RAG is something that I'm keep teasing you with, but don't worry, I'll explain exactly what that is. But you also need to know that there are a couple of other competitors, not competitors, but more advanced concepts in the landscape. So LLMs is not enough because people are now trying to say, I want to do even more, Chris. And then I start pointing them towards assistants. Now, assistants are fantastic because they're able to combine a set of different skills together to do more. So an assistant can do things for you based on, for example, tool calling that I've already showed you what that is. An assistant can actually generate code to solve problems that you didn't tell it how to solve, but it figures stuff out on the fly, which sounds fantastic. But it can also, what else can it do? It can manage your context window. So that's also not something that you need to think of so much, but it's not completely fully autonomous. So it's not that thing that you just send off on your merry way and you hope for the best. But this is still This is still like an LLM on steroids, if that makes sense. Now you've got the agent that a lot more people are talking about that are fully autonomous, that you can provide with a high-level goal. I won't go into agents so much today, but suffice to say, some people call everything agent, and I want you to know that ask the clarifying questions if they say agent. Can it operate on a high-level goal, or is it just a fancy name for an assistant? So we are the worst here, Microsoft, because we call everything an agent these days, and that's fine. Just learn to differentiate between a simple agent and a more advanced agent. That's my only ask to you, is like, ask some clarifying questions. How good is it? Right, let's talk more about RAG, right? Enough teasing. Well, so RAG, Retrieval Augmented Generation, is about using your LLM on your own data, and you kind of stand in front of a decision here. You are thinking, am I a company that needs a perfect looking LLM with perfect responses all the time? Then probably RAG isn't your best bet, but rather fine tuning. Fine tuning, on the other hand, getting an LLM to change its opinion on any topic is very, very difficult. It takes a lot of effort and a lot of training data to get there. That's why people are resorting to RAG type solutions instead. So RAG, Retrieval Augmented Generation, is about leveraging the underlying intelligence of the LLM model while having prompt context with your data plus your user prompt, and then it ends up responding, and that's a much better response. Now, I've showed you what this looks like in a very naive fashion, just copy-pasting some static text every time, but it's not very feasible and it's not very practical. So how do we go about it? Well, here is an architecture view. You probably want that at some point when you're trying to build a solution. So what do you do? Well, if we look at the bottom right corner, let's start here. Let's start with our data, our PDF file, our Word files, whatever unstructured data we have. What the first thing we want to do when we build a RAG type of solution is we need to upload it. The answer on Azure is called the blob storage. So what we do with that is just tuck it somewhere so that we can refer to it. So at the moment when we need it, it's put in the blob storage, and we also need to create a version of it that is searchable. And how do we do that? Well, we need to turn it into a vector version of itself. Once we do that, what happens at the moment of RAG querying is that the user prompt turns into a vector, and your indexed content is already a vector format. And now two vectors can be compared, and you can get a response that says this content is the content I want versus this content is not what I want. So PDF goes into blob storage. But what you see here with all this orchestration is at some point your PDF will turn into a vector version. That vector version will be stored in some kind of database. And then you got Azure AI sitting in the middle, orchestrating all the bits here. But as I said, if you really want to know more in detail about the RAG type of solution after these slides, I have a separate deck to show you step by step. Now, before we get as far though, I want you to understand a few things from a conceptual standpoint, because this is needed knowledge for you as a startup. You need to know roughly what you're doing. I'm not asking you to be data scientist or PhD in ML, but as application developers, you need to know roughly what's going on so that you can partner with people who understands this stuff. So first off, why a vector representation of text? Well, it lets itself be compared. Embedding. This is a concept we use. There are specific embedding endpoints towards your OpenAI service. What those are used for is that you say, here, take my Word file, take my PDF file, now turn this into a vectorized version of the same content, and it spits out a vector back. And then search. This is the interesting part, and here's where I'm saying the devil is in the detail, because how you search matter, and what search algorithm you use is based on what type of content you have. And as I said, I wanted to mention this more than one. Azure AI Search is your best friend here, because it allows you to upload data, to turn that into a vector and orchestrate the entire search, and this with a few lines of code. Now, I want you to see this image first. Sorry, I just need to change position. Thank you. Hope you didn't get spinny. So here is the visual that I want you to see. We look at a cat and a chicken and a banana and an apple and so on and so forth. And I want you to get a visual sense of how comparison happens. Because here we see that the fruit apple and the apple company is relatively closely related, but the cat and the apple is very far apart. And this is how close they are in a vector space. And this is how search comparison happens. This is how it roughly knows which things are related and which things are not. So your step one here, this is a pre-step. You are not doing this at the moment of the user querying, but you're doing this as a pre-step to make sure that your content is searchable. So what do? You have a couple of sentences here. One sentence says, the quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog. That's sentence number one. The second sentence says, the fox hops over the brown dog. Two seemingly similar sentences, but they are not the exact same sentence. So what do? Well, you send them through an embedding call, and this is calling an endpoint on OpenAI. Talks to an embedded endpoint that now turns this into a vector version of itself. And we are printing out the resulting vectors. And as you can see, that's not readable for the human eye, but it doesn't need to be. We just need to store it somewhere for later retrieval. And that somewhere is a vector database. So once we've done that, we have teed ourselves up for the next phase, which is the comparison. This phase happens at the moment of user querying your system. So at this point, the user is doing an active user query. We're trying to figure out what the user is saying by turning their user prompt into a vector, and then we take another piece of vector. In this case, I'm a bit lazy, so I've just taken the two previous sentences just to show you that they are similar semantically. So here it's saying 0.93, which is very close to 1, which is an exact match. So at this point, it's actually telling us, Chris, you know what? Quick brown fox jumps over lazy dog is very similar to a fox hopping over a brown dog semantically. Okay, that might make sense. What else? Well, and here's where the devil is in the detail a little bit when it comes to search. And here are the parts that you need to know. So what am I saying? There are a few different search comparison candidates. Cosine similarity, that was the first one I showed you. Then you have the dot product. This is a different way of comparing. You got the squared Euclidean, a third way of comparing the Manhattan comparison, and the Hamming distance. So don't worry, I know I will show you a few slides here that looks intimidating, but I just want to point out what is the different data type. So I believe we will share this deck so you can study the detail on your own time. But if you are running a taxi service, you probably need the Manhattan one just to make a specific call out. So cosine similarity. We're looking at an orange and an apple here, right? Orange and apples. And we are looking for the angle between A and B. We're not looking for the distance, but the angle. That's what tells us that they are related. Okay, that kind of makes sense, Chris, I think. But the dot product, and yeah, please don't be so intimidated by this, but if the cosine distance tells you the angle, the dot product tells you the angle and the magnitude. So if both of these matters, the dot product is probably a better fit for you. So use the dot product metric when you are, for example, doing a video search and not a text comparison. So if you're looking for the video with the highest rating, this is probably a better search because you're not saying, find me a video, but find me the strongest video, the strongest magnitude. And then, of course, there are more comparisons in here. I'm not going to bore you with every single detail, but we will provide the slide deck to you. But I just wanted to mention, yeah, there's quite a lot of context here. So please read up and maybe just paste this into a Copilot to understand more what the heck Chris is saying if you're application developers. But calling this out, if you're going to run the next Uber, you need to listen up because this is where you would use something like Manhattan, right? So if you have a taxi cab distance, you probably have vectors in space and they are pointing in various directions and you're trying to find your shortest path via a lot of objects like I need to turn left here or right there. At this point, the search comparison here, it's no good using a cosine similarity. So that's the context you need as application developers. The realization that data is different, depending on what search you're doing, you need a different search function. And then, of course, here's a outline comparison here between Manhattan and Euclidean. And what I'm saying here is that you want to use the Manhattan distance as the dimension of your data increases. And there's also the Hamming distance. It's a valuable tool for handling categorical data in machine learning tasks. And here's a bunch of details. Again, I'm not going to bore you with all the different details, more I want you to come to the realization that don't assume that cosine similarity is your go-to search. Know your data. And at this point, let's talk about this more advanced creature, namely assistants. So assistants are about being able to combine all these lovely properties, right? We have tool calling already that sound like awesome and amazing things, but what if we have a lot of different things? I see we have a question here, so I'm going to pause my sentence a second and see what it says. In what scenario does an enterprise use RAG, Azure AI Search, and in what scenario do we use an LLM? I'm a little confused about the difference between them. Right. So if you just so both of them are using an underlying LLM, right? That's the important part to understand. Both of them are leveraging an LLM as the brain. The difference is that the RAG is when you have PDF docs and Word docs, searchable text or searchable video files. So just using an LLM and nothing else means that you will only get a generic response. Now, if you want to do a kind of search based on your data, you need a RAG type pattern or you need tool calling. So the baseline is both of them are using LLM. The RAG enables you to search your data. So hopefully that answers the question. Great, fantastic. Now, imagine this scenario. Imagine now that an e-commerce says, I'm selling camping gear, suggest how I can best analyze the sales data. Now I've gone from being a customer to probably the guy that that you hire to actually analyze and see how are we doing as a startup. And the good news here is that a combination of properties and features is what's going to get you there. So at this point, the assistant says, well, to analyze your sales data, you probably need, I need to have a look at your Excel sheet, your Power BI, and a bunch of other stuff to actually make a good answer out of all this. So it's giving you hints, right? I want to see all your data where sales happened in some format, and I want to combine those, and I want to end up creating some kind of visual. So assistants, function calling and tool calling, you already know what that is. Code generation, this is generating code on the fly, and this is a bit magical, right? It actually will write code on the fly, and it will produce an output based on it coming up with code. And then you got file search. This is a built-in RAG. So what you do here is you actually upload content into the assistant, and it's able to perform RAG on that so that it can, for example, summarize the content in your document and search through it. And context management is the ability to keep track on how many chat messages in the window do I actually need to keep track of, the latest hundreds, the latest 3, and also make sure that if you have a requirement that says don't spend more than 10,000 tokens or my wallet is going to be very empty because I'm paying too much for my cloud bill. Now that we know that the assistant have all these powers, let's go down and try to talk more about the scenario. So assistants enable you to build more capable LLM app user experiences. The assistant API, which both OpenAI have and we as Azure have, enables you therefore to create highly scalable Copilot-like experiences out of this because it combines all of these properties and features. So here's how I want you to visually think about this. So here you're looking at an Azure AI assistant. You have an underlying LLM at the bottom, and it has a base instruction, a personality where you say you are a tourist guide in Malaga, for example, right? You set some kind of nice context and some other, maybe some guiding principles. And then you have the thread. This is like a while loop. It just goes through. Here's a user message. Here's an LLM response. Here's another user message, and so on and so forth. And then this is a loop that goes on. For every time it creates an assistant message from the LLM, it needs to figure out how to create it. So what it does is that it tries to figure out, should I use one of the tools that Chris actually provided me with to me? Should I search hotels, or is it actually telling me to do something completely outlandish, like producing a graph? And do I need to figure this out by myself? And so on. So it has a lot of different tools. It has a hammer, it has a screwdriver, and a lot of different tools. And it just needs to figure out how to produce a message in response. Okay, so let's try to call this out a little bit here, because here you have an assistant. We are creating it as a math tutor, okay? So we are giving it a system message. It's a math tutor, fantastic. And it's also of type code interpreter, which means that it now has the capability to generate its own code if it doesn't find a suitable tool that Chris has provided it with. And I'm also giving it a prompt where I say, I got an equation, solve it for me. I don't want to do my own homework. And then it ends up producing it actually ends up in a loop while it's working for the response. So once it's out of that loop, it will come to a point. So create the thread first with messages, create the message itself, create the run, and then we come to this part, because at this part, it's gone out of the loop that we are querying and say, are you done yet? Are you done yet? And now it's at the point where we need to investigate and see what actually happened. So at this point, the assistant now is giving you these messages back, and you need to figure out what these messages are. So are you of type text? Fantastic. We display this text. Or are you of type image, in which case we are actually visually showing an image. So imagine now that we have our sales assistant. At this point, if we get an image back, this is most likely some kind of graph or some kind of visual representation. So moving forward here a little bit, we are checking the message type response to react appropriately. And then let's actually show this in action. So now we have an assistant. It has tools, it has context management, and it has the ability to run its own code. So now if we run this demo, what you will see there is very similar to what we had before with tool calling, but this time we have a few extra features, right? So if you run this, you will see, if you scroll a little bit here, how it's able to have some tools and some JSON version of those tools. Now we run all the code at once, but there are a few tools in there that we will just see. Get revenue by region, okay. Get sales by month, great, that's another tool. And then we are giving it some kind of prompt at the end of the day where we tell it to go analyze. Go analyze all the things. Here are the basic tools. If it doesn't fit, do what you must, like do your magic. So at this point, we are now constructing a prompt, and one of the prompts is actually using one of our tools. We get a table response back from a database, and another tool here is gonna call a different set of tools. Again, we will, oh wow, what happened there? I definitely didn't have a tool that did that. This is code generation demonstrated live. It actually figured out how to draw up and present to us a graph. And this is the huge win, I would argue, with assistants. It's actually able to make up on the fly what it needs to do if I don't prepare and provide it all the tools that it should be able to use. So we're kind of summing up a little bit, but as I said, I definitely have a deck ready to also show you in case you have detailed questions on a graph and how do I actually get started. That's something, by the way, that we can provide to you after this talk as well. But what I wanted to call out here as I'm summing things up is Azure OpenAI service. This is the basics of everything. If you need to embedding, you need the service. If you need to do proper prompt call, you need the service. Azure AI Search, this is the one performing RAG. This is the one that takes all of your PDFs and your Word files, tuck those into a vector database, and orchestrate the entire thing. And Azure Assistant API, this is the one with all the cool properties that I showed you, tool calling, RAG on files, the generating code, context management, and much more. So hopefully all of this kind of provides you with, oh, I have this and that scenario, and for this scenario, an assistant would be good. But because I have so many PDFs, I want to do RAG. So with that said, I wanted to pause a little bit to see your questions in case I need to pull up a different deck in case you have RAG questions. Thank you.
Amazing. Thanks, Chris. This is actually this was different deck to last year. This is really cool. I think my favorite thing was the prompt engineering. I've been struggling with this all week. So this is really, really powerful. Any questions, everyone? Yes, very true, Tony. Very true. They change very quickly. But with your permission, I would also like to share last year's recording because it's a really powerful way for people to learn about Azure and how to use it. I mean, we've had such a boost to people from the community using it now. So it's really powerful. And we have a question, I think, from is that you, Mandy?
Yes.
MD?
Hi. Yeah, this is
Yeah.
Mandy. Hi. Chris, I actually have like two questions about Microsoft Cloud technologies. So the first one is how do you think Microsoft leverage cloud technologies to enhance customer success?
So I would say that that's our entire mission, right? Customer success. So the enablement we have is that you don't have to build a lot of these services by yourself, but especially in the context of AI, we provide a lot of services so that you don't have to have, for example, you could in theory download your own model locally and you can write all the code, but that takes a lot of time and effort. But if you want all the SLAs and guarantees that the cloud will give you, and also the ability to hook up security, I would say that it enables you as a startup to make sure that you have a solution that allows you to grow instead of having to rewrite it later, right? Because we give you authentication, we give you scale, we give you the ability to exist in different regions and so on. So my general answer is that all of these solutions that we are providing to you enable you to compete with some of the biggest companies out there because of the scalability, because of the enterprise level security and many other features. And especially now in the context of AI, we try to be at the forefront to make sure that it's almost seamless to integrate that capability into your apps.
I see. I have another follow-up question. What do you think like are the current AI trends that you believe like will impact like enterprise success in the future, like in the next few years?
Great question. And what we've seen so far is that we've been in a hype curve, right? I don't know if you've seen the hype curve, but it kind of looks like this and goes down a little bit. But the point is, everyone got super excited with AI, right? And it's been very, very hard to move forward into that trend. But what I see happening now, trend-wise, is that people are starting to say, okay, AI is the main dish, but we are actually having requirements on what AI means. So we're saying that AI must actually do stuff for us. So we've had traditional AI for the last 20 years or so for, credit card frauds, and it's part of our mobile phones to take better images and so on. But right now, where we are with AI and especially generative AI, is that we are now displaying best practices patterns, and we're also saying that there's a next wave here, which are agents. Now, agents will be part of everything. It will be part of your MLOps pipeline. It will be part of your everyday to just help you with all the many things. Now, I've been having this conversation with a lot of people in academia, and we are all in agreement that agents will be literally everywhere, and everything about your life is about to be automated, and it will happen.
I see. So agent will more be like AGI, is it?
Yeah, so AGI is an interesting question because we are not quite there. And I think a lot of venture capitalists were sold on the fact that LLM was going to be the next AGI, the general intelligence. I personally don't believe that that technology will lead us there, but I think people are doing a lot of horizontal research because right now the attention is on AI. That's where the investor money is. I think we will reach there sooner or later, but AGI is a big promise, right? It's like human level intelligence and beyond. We're definitely not there, but I would say that the wins we're seeing today with NLP user interfaces are a huge win, right? Or the ability for us to learn things in a fraction of the time, and just bringing that human layer to everything idea in the technology industry is a huge win in itself. So AGI, that's going to wait a little bit, but right now we're moving at breakneck speed. So I don't know what wait a little bit is, to be honest. That could be months or years.
I see. Thank you.
Absolutely. See, Jay, you have your hand up.
Sorry, I was muted. Classic. Always one person on the call. Just wanted to say thank you so much for a great presentation. I think you explained some of those concepts very well. So thanks very much. I have a question on specifically like data warehouses and extracting data from, I mean, within a company, right? So I suppose the traditional approach is quite a tiresome effort of creating a data warehouse and data engineering to try get the pipelines right. And then extracting it is also relatively static, right? You have to create Power BI dashboards and SQL code. I'd be interested to get your opinion on whether you think that's going to change in the future and whether like access to data is going to just become like almost instant, right?
So I would say your future has already changed with Azure Fabric. So you're right, you need to build some kind of data warehouse, but today in the cloud, we refer to these as data lakes, right? So we try to collect all the different information cross cloud, within cloud, static resources, and so on. Everything is fitted into that same lake, and you're using the same query language, and you end up creating dashboards from prompts and redoing them with prompts. So I would say that the future is already here, but you just need to find a way to identify the right data, put that in the lake, and then make sure to actually say what you want
So
with a prompt.
would you say that AI agents or systems or whatever is available, is the quality of extracting that data at a point where we're happy with it going into that data lake using AI, or do you feel like there's still chance for error?
I would say that error management is definitely a big thing. I mean, in the early days of LLMs, that was a huge thing because hallucinations are still a big thing. We are better today. We have links that we at least provide with responses, and we should still be very cautious on whatever output we get. But one thing, technology-wise, that's actually been a big thing is structured outputs. That many LLMs have the ability to actually give us something back that looks like a class or an object in a programming language, and which makes parsing of the response a lot easier. And that enables us to have less errors and less of, I don't know what the LLM did this time, I can't even read the response. But there are two parts to this, right? One is the whole parsing of the response, and the other bit is, can we trust the response? So my answer is that the more context you can provide to it, the better, and the more you can be guided with like prompt engineering principles, the better. With that said, every LLM for every generation becomes a lot smarter. We are not there yet where we can honestly call it reasoning, but we're definitely trying to get in that direction. So we are much better off than in the early days than the LLMs, but we're not quite there yet with AGIs and perfect recall.
Cool, thank you.
Awesome. Any more questions? Cool. Well, Chris, how did it feel to be back?
Yeah, it's always good to be back, right? So both with Oxbridge and in London for more than 2 seconds. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it is always a treat, and I'm looking forward to seeing you on Friday during the semifinals, which is going to be super exciting. We've got 44 startups who are going to go crazy, and there's a networking and drinks. So if anyone here is keen to join us for networking and drinks, please, I'm going to share this type form with the invitation, and so we'd love to have you.
Great. So I believe I had a couple of more slides in this deck actually, because oh yeah, that is you, Anne-Claire, I believe.
Yeah.
Yes,
I think you should do it. You should do it. We're recording this, so I think it'd be very useful for everyone else.
Yeah, no, if we can have just 2 minutes to make sure that folks who are part of Founders Hub already, or if you're willing to join Founders Hub based on Chris' presentation. So really the idea is to emphasize that, as Tony mentioned at the beginning of the call, as part of Oxbridge-AI partnership, you will get into a level on Founders Hub, which is the platform where we put all of the benefits, the guidance, and the offering for founders. You will get into the 5,000 credits offering with the guidance from technical and business experts if you apply to Founders Hub today. So I'm just gonna share my screen very quickly. Oh, this is a very nice view, but that's not the view I wanted to share. So again, as a reminder, Microsoft for Startups Founders Hub, we are providing with up to 150,000 cloud credits, Azure Cloud credits to founders. And as you grow, you will be unlocking those offering and Azure Cloud credits through Founders Hub. If you want to unlock and use Azure, you will need to go onto the benefits tab and start redeeming and activating your Azure account. You will have to do it within the next 3 months of applications and creation of your profile on Founders Hub to be part of the program. Then, as you can see, you can unlock any other tools for you to build your application software as well and run your business. As Chris mentioned, there is ultimately a lot of different skills and features that you need to know about Azure, and we know that ultimately there is a lot of complex features or service that you might not know, but we have through Founders Hub a team called Azure Pairing, and essentially what they are here to do for you on Founders Hub is to help you with your journey on Azure. So whether you want to get started on Azure, you want to have an architecture review, you want to have some support on your cost optimization, if you want to migrate, be multi-cloud, then this team, specifically experts on Azure, will be able to help you on a one-to-one session via Founders Hub. And that team is free of charge. You just need to log in on Founders Hub and explain the challenges that you have. Additionally, let's say if you want to have a bit more of answer about a specific technical challenge or questions around AI, or if you want to tap into a specific market, as well as having business support from experts, then you can do that through Founders Hub. We have over 1,000 experts on this platform who are Microsoft employees supporting startups on a one-to-one basis. And as you can see here, you can choose the technology expertise, the business expertise. You can select a specific product as well, the industry, the language, as well as the region. And really, this is one of the added value of Founders Hub is not only you get offerings and Azure credits to build your solution, but you will have access to real people with expertise and skilling based on your challenge and the startup that you want to build. You also have access to our discovery tab. You can have access to technical trainings, business module. That's something that we encourage every founders to do. And finally, you have access to the latest generative AI models, and we have pre-templates created for you to test, should you wish to do so. And we always again advise founders to use this section build with AI. Again, Microsoft for Startup Founders Hub is a self-service platform, so we always encourage you to go, but it's self-serve, and we want to make sure that founders are using them. We have an AI assistant, which is ultimately the copilot for founders. If you have any question or if you can't find any support presented on the platform or via email, then just ask the question to the AI assistant, and it will be able to help you on your journey through Founders Hub. And I think that's it. And I have a next slide, which will be, if you're not part of Founders Hub, I'm sure we will be able to put a link on the chat, but we have a nice QR code here. Ultimately, please do not hesitate you have to use the Oxbridge-AI partnership on the application. But that's something that Uday can reshare just in case. And if you are part of Founders Hub, then you will have to go to the to Founders Hub website and logging through your LinkedIn profile. This is for me.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Anne-Claire. Really appreciate that. As Anne-Claire mentioned, if you're applying to Founders Hub, don't forget to click on Oxbridge-AIx as your affiliate program. This is one of the amazing opportunities that we're able to provide to you as a member of our community. And thank you again for joining us today on a Monday night. But we're super excited. As I said, semi-finals coming up, finals coming up, and a whole bunch of other awesomeness. So thank you again, Chris. Thanks, Anne-Claire, Tony. Have a great one, and see you all soon.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye.